This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Season saved. Next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Yes, caught.
They said you can't beat Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, and a touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle, caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet, touchdown Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sacked. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace, and welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. And yes, it is not hyperbole at all. Michigan saved its season. That doesn't mean it is saved for good, but it does mean it is saved for now. As the Wolverines pull out a gut check win over USC. And by the way, the Trojans, they're not soft. I mean, they came back after they were getting pummeled as a kind of a welcome to the Big Ten here. You know, SoCal, and they came back and punched us in the mouth right back. And we're in this all the way to the end. Miller Moss just kept getting back up over and over again. He was either knocked down, pressured, or sacked on over 40% of his dropbacks, and he dropped back 51 times. That is an afternoon. And yet he got back up and he kept coming, man. So hats off to USC. They absolutely brought it as well. But this was the game that Michigan had to have. And the Wolverines did. Now, they did it in a bit of an unconventional way, I guess. Although, guys, did you not watch? Some of you, I think, just started watching Michigan football like 3 years ago. No, that can't even be true, because then you wouldn't be shocked by this. But, guys, it is not abnormal for Michigan to have, and not even attempt to have, virtually any passing game at all and still win a very big game. Remember Cade McNamara against Washington in 2021, and that was supposed to be that year's big non-conference game. Now, we didn't know yet that Washington was going to suck, but that was kind of the game that launched Michigan's season, was winning that game. Well, Cade McNamara threw for 40 yards in that game. Michigan ran for over 300 yards. Michigan has now run for over 600 yards the last two games. Khalil Mulling's out there looking like Leroy Horde in the 89 Rose Bowl, the last son of Krypton kind of stuff. Just tearing guys up, and they're bouncing off of him like he's Earl frickin' Campbell in a flyaway jersey. And one of the most surreal 2-minute drills of all time, where your tailback carried for, what was it, 74 of the 83 yards. So doesn't matter. As the late, great Al Davis once said, just win, baby. And this is one Michigan had to have. I want to give credit to the coaches on both sides. Essentially, Michigan did offensively everything we suggested on this show. Alex Orji should be the starter. There should be a run-focused offense. Khalil Mulling should be the bell cow. They made all those moves, and it paid off. Now, I agree, and I'm sure we'll get into more of this with Mark Rogers here in the next segment. All right, because as John U. Bacon says, Michigan fans ain't happy unless they unhappy. All right. Like the amount of you that are like just never have watched Michigan football before and were shocked we didn't throw for 300 yards blows my mind. Okay, we often didn't throw for 200 yards, and that's even we had the top 10 pick in a draft at quarterback. All right, but that doesn't mean your thoughts, if you're one of those people who can't take a W, and you should. I mean, I can doomsay and speak and dauber down and emotionally hedge bet against my favorite team with the best of them, and even I don't understand how you're not totally ecstatic with this win, given what was at stake. The amount of recruits and level of recruits that were at this game as well, okay? This was just Michigan had to have it, and they got it, all right? Now, that doesn't mean that there's not further development to be done at quarterback. But keep in mind, the coaches made a mistake not starting with Orji. So this was game one. And he didn't get a warm-up game against Arkansas State or Fresno State like Davis Warren did. So here you go, kid. You get to start at quarterback. Don't make any mistakes, because if we lose, the season's over. That's not an easy gig, guys. So Orji didn't make any mistakes. So already he's better than Davis Warren, because we were turning the ball over once every 4 possessions under Davis Warren. So box checked. All right. Every single down, even a half a second of hesitation, wondering if Orji is keeping it or not, absolutely opened up running lanes for Michigan. Box checked. We asked less pass blocking for a young offensive line that has not been good pass blocking. And look what happened. On the run side, Michigan's running backs, average yards per carry before first contact was 3 yards. That is Joe Moore award-winning stuff. Anything over 2.5 is considered very good. Anything 3 and over is elite. Okay, so Orji's legs being there to give the offensive line and just a little more in terms of defensive hesitancy. And then the stick-to-itiveness of the running game. You get your best offensive line performance as well. You see young guys that struggled early in this year. Evan Link, 2 weeks ago, got a 0 grade from Pro Football Focus. 2 weeks later, he's the guy that springs the block or gets the block that springs Kalel Mullings for what was the biggest play of the game, the 63-yard run. Jair Sugar Hill, man, got just absolutely abused by Texas. I think Steve Sarkisian just threw at him again. It was like every play, hey, where's 20 at? Throw there, okay? He comes off the bench here. Will Johnson is banged up. Will Johnson's the best player we have. He's not even on the frickin' field for USC's last 2 possessions when we get stops, which I'll talk about the defense here in a second. But Jair Hill comes off the bench, plays phenomenal, gets an 85 PFF grade, just below Will Johnson. This is how you build confidence as a program. I don't know, man. I watched this win a lot of games most of my childhood, and we've watched this win a lot of games under Jimmy Harbaugh with quarterback play that wasn't much different than what we just saw. Now, the difference between those teams and what we did last year is the quarterback we had a year ago, okay? We don't have that player right now. But what we do need to do is develop more of a passing game. And this is the week to do it. Doesn't mean I'd be throwing 20 times. I would not. I'm pretty confident if Alex Orji throws the ball 20 times, we lost, all right? But I think the same pass ratio, Anthony Broom over at the Wolverine has a great analysis out today. I agree with it wholeheartedly. I think the same rush pass ratio will work, provided that those passes are more effective. So this week it is what 2, 3, 4 pass plays do we think that Orji can execute in the offense that will keep defenses somewhat honest that he's a threat? Run those. Next week you go on the road to Washington. Find 2 or 3 more. Run those. Then you got to bye. Come back with 5 or 6. And before you know it, you've got about 10 passing plays that you are confident that you have seen him do in practice and games that he can execute, which will open up the running game all the more. So if you look at this as game 1, I know it's not to us and to the team's record, but in terms of what the team is now with this dramatic switch from one system of quarterback to another, it is game 1. I think there's a lot here to be thankful for, and especially the fact that the season has hope and lives on. And I think we also, oh, by the way, mad props to Tommy Doman. He was an All-American level punter last year, except the Iowa guy was just all Galaxy, so no one cared. He's been cheeks all year, and he finally showed up for the 24 season right when we needed him the most and consistently pinned USC into bad field position and helped us to play complementary football. So good to see Tommy Doman back to what we used to see him able to do, which brings me to the defense. And, you saw Wink. The old dog can learn some new tricks. He learned some things from what Sark did to him 2 weeks ago when Lincoln Riley runs a lot of the similar kind of an offense, similar kind of an approach to the game. And you could see right away that Lincoln Riley tried to get out into into space and on the flats and stretch our defense out of space and get some poor fits horizontally, which Texas exploited. Those weren't there this time. Yeah, you saw that we were blitzing over 40% of the time before this weekend. We blitzed 28% of the time. And you saw and we showed trust in the front four, and those guys delivered all game long. Josiah Stewart was, National Defensive Player of the Week level good. Still got a linebacker issue with Jayshawn Barham. Right now with Jayshawn Barham, it's the worst of both worlds. He's just not diagnosing plays, but he's a world-class athlete. So he's just taking himself out of position like that, and the rest of the defense can't recover. That's what happened on that one long run USC had. That was his gap. He's standing right there, just takes himself out of the play, and the USC tailback just goes right by him for 60 yards. Okay, and that was essentially their entire running game that afternoon, because they only had 30 yards on the rest of their carries. So we got to figure that out. We'd be better off if Jayshawn Barham was, like slower and neck roll middle linebacker, because at least if you're going to run yourself out of plays like that, you're still maybe someone at least in the way, okay? But when you're that level of a Devin Bush explosive athlete and you're misdiagnosing the play, that's a problem, and they got to fix that. Other than that, though, pretty much all the other defensive issues were fixed. Couple communication errors in the secondary. Again, that football is not a game of perfect. That's going to happen, okay? One of them was inexcusable, and that was a wide open touchdown. I doubt that Wink called a cover zero blitz inside the red zone. I think Barry, who was phenomenal all game long except for that play, I think maybe he just didn't get the right call from the sideline. But yeah, Wink learned. And then if you end up stopping USC and Lincoln Riley on the last two drives without Will Johnson on the field, he's standing on the sidelines. Just a great job by Wink. And here's some stats to back that up. A Lincoln Riley coach team had never started a game with 4 straight punts before. You force a Lincoln Riley coach team to punt 7 times. You let them drop back to throw over 51 times, and they don't even get 300 yards. Those are outstanding performances by a defense against this Lincoln Riley coached offense. So well done by Wink. I think the identity of this team now that we expected to see going in has been established. I think the floor now is solid. The ground is solid underneath us now. But for us to reach the ceiling of getting into the playoffs for a 4th straight year, that is where that development of the quarterback position and what throws can Orji make with confidence that the coaches will be confident to let him try to make. That will determine what the ceiling is from here. We'll talk about that and more with Mark Rogers here next. And welcome back here on Michigan Podcast. Time now for the 10-minute war, or thereabouts, with our good friend Mark Rogers. Let's get the jaundiced scarlet and gray view of things, because I just talked about how I think Michigan probably saved its season on Saturday against USC. And Mark, of course, has a fantastic channel here on YouTube as the voice of college football. So many great correspondents and stringers covering the sport all over the country. So much great information there. And Mark's game week picks are usually pretty good as well, year after year. So Mark, good to see you again, brother. How are you?
Doing well, Steve. Got a program here that I've already slammed on a regular basis for years and years and years for claiming national championships before the forward pass was legal. And now they're taking us back 100 years.
We didn't play football before the forward pass. That didn't happen. Those years don't count.
Play under the current rules.
Okay.
And played rugby, basically.
I think they couldn't have anything to do with the fact that we were great and Ohio State was not during that period of time. Could it? I'm sure it's
no. It's an objective analysis.
Completely inconsequential to your analysis. But let's get to your analysis of this game. By hook or by crook, doesn't matter how it gets done. I do think a lot of Michigan fans don't watch a lot of other college football, because the reality is most of college football is teams quarterbacked by guys closer to Alex Orji than J.J. McCarthy. All right, about 80% of college football is guys who are just Jags, and especially if they are somewhat athletic, they can make a play with their feet, and they're still developing as a passer. Another 10% is what Davis Warren and Deacon Hill were, zeros. And then the other 10% are actual real difference makers, guys that are elevators to their program that make the guys around them better. Here's the thing that Orji didn't do. Didn't make any catastrophic mistakes. Prior to Orji being the starter, Michigan was averaging a turnover 1 every 4 possessions, Mark. That's not good. Okay, and it's hard to play complementary football and play to your defense when you're turning it over like that. And then Khalil Mullings went out there and looked like the last son of Krypton, just running like Leroy Horde in the '89 Rose Bowl. So I've watched this game before. I don't really know what some of these Michigan fans are complaining about unless they were all born like in the year 2015. Okay, because I pretty much watched Michigan win year after year after year, playing a lot of games looking like this under Bo Schembechler and Lloyd Carr. Gary Moeller tried to modernize the offense a little bit and was on his way to doing that. And, he got in some trouble off the field. But this is, kind of been Michigan football. We're 7-0 now since 2014 when we throw for less than 100 yards, by the way. So your thoughts, Mark?
Steve, we'll start on the side of the ball that everybody wants to hear about, and that concerns Alex Orji. I was interested in hearing that Gary Danielson actually said in watching Alex Orji's throwing motion that there's nothing wrong with it. I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but he knows a lot more about throwing the football at that level and beyond than I do. But do we know that Alex Orji can throw the ball beyond the line of scrimmage? That's just, again, I don't know what this is going to look like down the road. I do believe that this was the way to approach this game, and Sharon Moore proved out to be correct. For as critical as I've been about his handling of the quarterback situation, this was the way to approach this game, and it's going to have to be the way to approach the rest of the season while you continue to develop Alex Orji in practice and then give him a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. What my concern would be as a Michigan fan is that they could take this against Oregon at home. They could duplicate this against Ohio State. And I'm not saying that this is the best game plan or this is the optimum situation. Of course, it's not to be balanced on offense, but this is the best way to approach those teams. However, this may also bring the pack closer to Michigan, meaning the Illinois game in particular. Wow, that team looked good against Nebraska. But even the lower echelon of the Big Ten, I'm not expecting Minnesota to challenge Michigan this Saturday because that's a bad football team. But, man, the spread is 8.5 or 9 points. I think much of that has to do with Michigan is going to bring everybody else closer to a phone booth kind of game. And when you play those kind of games, there is the chance that if you make a mistake, Michigan makes a mistake, that they could bring, a game that they should blow out from a talent perspective back into play.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, we saw this in the Lloyd Carr era. We saw this with Lloyd Ball, where they'd go and figure out how to lose to Jim Coletto at Purdue, and that you really had to figure that out. Like you had to search out, how do I lose to Jim Coletto? Like you had to Google it. And then you have to go into page 47 to get the answer, because the first few results yielded nothing, right? And then to go out and actually accomplish that by let's run our nose guard on 1st and goal for reasons, okay? So they would do that and then turn around as a 17-point underdog and beat number 2 Ohio State on the road, But the reality is that's the kind of team we have this year. We got caught in a quarterback vortex. And JJ and Jimmy did not move on until basically everybody who was worthy of something was pretty much already accounted for. And then you bring in maybe guys that might be better than what you have now, but are they that much better that it's worth disrupting a locker room? Culture is a big thing at Michigan. When Michigan is successful, culture is a big thing. There was a culture established here for 30 years, from Bo to Mo to Lloyd. It took Jimmy, over 5 years to reestablish that culture. And so Michigan is always going to be a program when it's going well that it's maybe not always going to take the most talented guy and recruit off the list, as much as, hey, is this low 4-star going to fit more into our culture than this top 150 guy? And hey, if the top 150 guy fits in our culture, great, but they're going to make those kinds of personnel decisions. That's the culture of our program. And somebody who follows this pretty closely, there really weren't a lot of guys in the transfer portal after about January 10th or so that I can demonstrably say right now you could have inserted into this culture and they would have been dramatic upgrades over what we currently have. Maybe there were, but you're taking that reverb risk as well when you put somebody, and you already had so many new faces, the new strength and conditioning coach and everything else. And I think we're just going to have to ride with this. I think that people need to recognize that this was game one of this season now. And I understand you have PTSD because you watched what happened with the previous 3 weeks, and that did say Michigan on it. But this is a totally different team running a totally different style of offense now, and it was game one. And I think that, this shouldn't have been game one. I told you last week, I thought Orji should have started last week so you could have got him ready for this week. Okay. And I can understand. I mean, Warren's confidence is already shot, Mark. If they go out there on that last drive and lose because Orji can't convert a 4th and 5 or throws an interception, what's his confidence for the rest of the year, right? I thought it was the right move. You're a program built on your offensive line. Offensive line at Michigan is what the receiver position is at Ohio State. Okay. And that's what the program's all about. It's rushed for about 600 yards the last 2 weeks. I wouldn't change. This is not much different. I mean, Michigan in 2022 with JJ still ran the ball 58% of the time. Okay. This is going to be a 60-40 offense regardless. What I think needs to happen is they need to figure out what he can do. It's not about throwing more than 12 times. It's about figuring out the 4 or 5 pass plays he can execute so that he can be at least a threat as we move down the line. That's what it's about. It is not about frequency. It's about what 4, 5, 6 plays. In Cade's year, we basically, until we played Michigan State secondary that was terrible that year, Cade was throwing to Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards out of the backfield, dumping it off. We had a tight end delay play that worked really well, a lot for big plays, and flea flickers. There were about 5 pass plays that Cade was throwing most of that year too. And they got to figure out what are those 5 pass plays and routes that Orji can execute that make throwing a threat, so that you don't see what you saw in the second half when essentially USC just went, like Tecmo Bowl bare front the entire rest of the game. Okay. Like all 11 guys in the box. That you can't have. Okay. But they can figure that out. I'm sure. I'm confident in that.
So, Steve, I'm right there with you based on where they stand right now. I was saying the same thing. Develop Orji, figure out what he can do, limit it to 4 or 5 pass plays. Maybe in a best case scenario, he's, Jalen Milroe at the end of the year. I don't think that's going to happen, but it possibly could. He's got the arm strength. Okay. I want to take us back to one point that you made and then also ask you a question. So you are telling me, now I agree with you that there would be a culture consideration in going into the transfer portal for a quarterback if they were going to develop the quarterback at a reasonable rate this past offseason. I would have said, yeah, if I'm running the show, I'm going to make a consideration against going to the portal because I don't want to mess up what we have. But if you could have looked ahead to see this, you wouldn't have gone into the transfer portal for a quarterback. And you don't think Michigan's culture is strong enough to bring in a player who's been proven to be productive somewhere else. So it's not like he's some kind of renegade wild card of a behavior problem. You know that the guy has been able to run an offense and keep his nose clean somewhere else. So the culture should be strong enough to bring in another player from another program and assimilate him into the culture. Correct?
Who? Tell me who it was. Who was it though?
Will Rogers.
He was already at Washington at this point. He committed. Okay. He committed before the national championship game. Decommitted and then recommitted again. Okay. But he was already, he had already committed to Washington by that point.
Sure.
Here's the other thing though. I actually think this style of offense is better with the makeup of this team because the other factor we have is, have you watched us in pass pro? Okay. So, and this has been true, in this era, this is, you see this in the NFL now where Jimmy has taken Justin Herbert and he's just not even a viable fantasy football quarterback anymore. Okay. And same thing is true here. And when you watch our routes in Jimmy's offense from the all 22, it's not like yours at all. These are laborious route trees. These are not quick openers. These take time. Routes take time to develop, things of that nature. I really think Davis Warren failing is a mixed blessing because this is what we should have been doing all along, is something like this. We were always going to have to make shift this year and play to the running game. And I think that a young coaching staff took over. We have a 28-year-old offensive line coach, a 39-year-old head coach. Our offensive coordinator is even younger than that. And previously, his only other gig was Old Dominion. I think a lot of young guys wanted to show, we could modernize Michigan, and we'll get there. I'm confident they'll bring us there. But they wanted to do too much of it, I think, too fast. I think with what we have this year, this is the style of football we should have been organizing around and figuring out from the very beginning. And I also think, frankly, the players really like Alex Orji.
Well, Steve, on that final drive, they had about 88 yards to go and about 245, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Now, if Khalil Mullings doesn't throw the cape on, they don't win that game, of course. I was even impressed once they got to
That's true in every 2-minute drive, Mark. I mean, if Joe Montana doesn't thread a needle to John Taylor, they don't win a Super Bowl. I think people that's not untrue in every 2-minute drive. I think we're just accustomed to it looking a certain way. But that's true in every 2-minute drive at the end of a game. If your best player isn't your best player on the final drive, you're going to lose. All right. I mean, Mark, that's true whether it's your tailback, whether not. That's what's unconventional is it being your tailback. OK, but that's true in any 2-minute situation. It's just Michigan did it differently than throwing the ball up in the air to a receiver and telling him to go moss somebody.
Counting on a 65-yard run against a decent defense, that was great. That's phenomenal. That's what transpired. That's what happened. It proved me wrong because I have to admit, I was sitting there thinking they can't go 90 yards in 2.5 minutes running the football.
Oh, you weren't the only one thinking that.
I'm throwing Davis Warren. I'm throwing somebody. If Jack Tuttle was ready, I'd throw him in because he just has a less propensity to throw it to the other team. But if you're not going to pick up first downs and move the ball and score the touchdown to win the game, obviously, had it been a field goal situation, maybe they might keep Orji in. But I put the passer in needing the full 90 yards to score the touchdown. And if you throw an interception, if you throw a pick, the game's over anyway. If you can't convert first downs, I'm putting the quarterback in. I know it worked out this time, but relying on a 65-yard running play.
Oh, you'd have lost this team. If you put Davis Warren in and he can't deliver, you've lost the team. And you're probably going Rich Rod year one. And I'm dead serious about that. You got a second loss before we get to October. You got a bunch of veteran players that are, have already turned down massive offers to other schools to stay here and get paid less, that have NFL futures. You put Davis Warren in that game, in that situation, he goes out there and chokes that away, you have lost the team. I think they actually handled it right, and not just because of the result, which was, hey, you said to the players, you could just tell that this is the guy they wanted. That's the hardest they've played all year. And so, hey, this is the guy you wanted. Okay, this is what we're limited to. So I heard you. All right, you better go deliver. And they did. I mean, Michigan, not to be, I think it's being completely overlooked. Michigan got USC to shut down and have to punt to get the ball back, and then stopped them on the last drive without Will Johnson on the field. He didn't play in either of those two drives. Okay, so you're with. By the way, Will Johnson, he's Michigan's leading touchdown receiver. He doesn't have a reception because he's returned 2 interceptions for touchdowns. Okay, so you take him off the field. He's the best overall football player on the field. Period. And I think there's a lot to come out of this game. Jair Hill, who really struggled the first few weeks, former high-profile recruit, was phenomenal when he came into the game at the end when Will was hurt and made a couple of key PBUs. Evan Link still isn't much better of a pass protector than you and I are, but he's the one that throws that block at the end out there on that springs Khalil for the big run. I mean, I think there's a lot of big confidence boosters here. And it's like people haven't watched the last 3 years of Michigan football to believe that this is just a quarterback-centric offense. We had no idea J.J. McCarthy could do what he did until we got down by 10-3 to Ohio State on the road. If everybody go back to that game in 2022. We tried to play Blake Corum with that knee, remember. That's how we started. We started by trying to play Blake Corum with that knee and trying to run him like we did the previous 11 weeks, and he couldn't go. All right. Then we tried running other guys. They weren't getting anywhere. Right. And we just started chucking and ducking with JJ because there was no other alternative. And that was JJ McCarthy's 10th start as a college football player. And he had already played meaningful snaps the week before. So that's just not our culture. And it's just not what Michigan football has really ever been about, for better or for worse. And I think not putting this on the quarterback and allowing the rest of the team to show that this is what they believe in, I think that was the right coaching move, because I think it also established a certain identity for Michigan that they did not have after the first 3 games of the season.
Well, it turned out to be the way to play the game. And again, I agreed with the approach at the outset, but I would have done something different at the conclusion of the game. But it worked out. They made it happen. I think USC was the better team from about early second quarter until the final drive of the game. But it doesn't matter because Michigan made like 4 huge plays that wiped out everything positive USC did.
So moving forward, you're catching Minnesota, which is in a very desperate situation after losing to Iowa. That was basically the same game we played. I mean, Cade McNamara had 11 completions for 60 yards. Okay, and Minnesota stacked the box. Caleb Johnson has faced more stacked boxes than any running back in the country. He's averaging like 9 yards a carry or something against stacked boxes. Just ran all over Minnesota. So the good news for Michigan is, we're going to play the exact same way that Minnesota just lost last week. The good news for Minnesota is they're going to see exactly what they just lost to last week, so they should be ready for it, But I do think your point about this raises the ceiling, but raises the floor, but lowers the ceiling as well in terms of margin for error, both at the bottom of the schedule and the top. I think that's 100% right on. What I think you'll see this week, Mark, is there'll be 3 or 4 pass plays that they didn't show last week that they worked on this week. And I think they'll do one or two of them early just to show that Orji is a bit of a threat. And then I think against Washington next week, there'll be 3 or 4 more. Then they'll have a bye. And my guess is coming out of the bye, there'll be 5 or 6 more. My guess is they'll do this piecemeal by piecemeal by piecemeal by piecemeal. And it'll be, what is he comfortable with? And then also, though, what deceptively throws people off from what we do in the running game. It'll be what feeds off of that as well. Okay. So that people think that they're seeing a certain look and they know what we're going to run, and we run something completely counter off of the same exact look, is what I'm saying. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's the way to play smart offensive football, is to set up the defense for something later in the game using similar formations and looks. Now, if they're able to accomplish what you just laid out for Alex Orji, and by the end of this season, when it's Oregon, Ohio State, anybody else that's a threat, of course, the trip, I think it's a road game with Illinois, then this is a championship contender in the Big Ten. It really is, because everything else, we saw the defensive line, just the pass rush in this game. And USC's got they've got a capable, decent offensive line, especially in pass pro. And that defensive front was devastating against Miller Moss. Obviously, just threw him around all day and made life miserable on him. And the offensive line was exceptional, of course. And so, yeah, this is a championship contender if they have some semblance. I can't imagine that they can throw out this same exact game plan with the ineptitude of the pass game and beat Oregon and Ohio State. Of course, Alex Orji is not going to be going 35 for 45 in those games, but 60 to 80 yards of effective passing in the right spots. So your formula, I think, makes sense. And that's something that can be accomplished, especially with the defense playing much better and the offensive line at this point playing better than they did last year at this point.
Well, let's before we let you go, let's talk some of that defense, because Wink Martindale got lit up by Joel Klatt last week, pointing out his blitz rate compared to Jesse Minter's. Well, obviously he listened. Okay, we were averaging over 40% blitz rate going into this game. I think that we only blitzed 28% of the time in this game. You talked about Michigan's front 4. In this game against USC, Miller Moss was either hit, pressured, or sacked on 40% of his dropbacks. And when you consider he dropped back more than 50 times, that is a lot. That's a lot of mileage to be putting on your quarterback. And by the way, props to that kid, man. He was not California cool or soft at all. He was tough as nails, man. And he still dropped a few dimes throughout the course of that game as well. But a couple things about Wink, and I was critical of the way we played too. But credit to him, and credit to the coaches in general for being flexible and adjusting and being humble and not saying, no, we know more than what your eyes can see. So Wink with more of a Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter approach, let the front four do the work, and that worked. This is the first time ever, Mark, that a Lincoln Riley coach team had to punt on its first 4 possessions. That had never happened before. If you hold Lincoln Riley to less than 30 points, you make him punt 7 times. And you make a USC quarterback throw over 50 times and he's still under 300 yards. Brother, that's a hell of a defensive effort, man. Okay, that's just too good of a scheme. Even USC at better than average has too good of athletes in space that you're going to just absolutely lock that down. Okay, so if you're making USC punt 7 times, drop back more than 50 times, and they're still under 300 yards, and you have a 40% havoc rate in your pass rush, phenomenal. And I think we also have to give Wink credit for this. He hasn't been a college coordinator for decades. And in his first 3 games here, or first 4 games here, he's already had to face Sarkisian and Lincoln Riley, who could very well be the 2 best offensive minds in the entire sport. Okay. And they run virtually the same offense. And you could see he learned some things from Texas. You could see USC right away try to get the ball out in the flats and run horizontally and get it out and expose us in space, which Texas did. And you could see that we were much more prepared for that than we were the last time around. So I think Wink Martindale deserves a lot of credit here as well. There's clearly still some communication issues. I mean, I can't believe Wink is calling a cover 0 blitz in the red zone. So that tells me Zeke Berry got the wrong call, and that was their that was the tie, or one of their touchdowns there. And so there's some communication issues there that they need to iron out still. But that was a phenomenal defensive performance, man.
Yeah, Coach is not going to stick around in the NFL for as long as Wink Martindale, and I think I made this point last week going into the game, and I might be the one of the 2 people sitting here who actually picked Michigan to win this game outright.
Yeah, I did not know.
Is that, those guys are smart at the next level, and it's not surprising me one way or the other that he's figuring things out, and it's taken him a little bit of time, just 3 or 4 weeks. But we talked about this USC offense, not in regards to personnel and certainly not the offensive line, but being a facsimile of USC. And if he's able to increase, and the number that you brought up was one that I've been touting all week, 283 yards passing on 51 pass attempts. That's a successful defensive showing. And just if you beat up a quarterback like that, and most will not be still staring at that pass rush late in the 4th quarter, as well as Miller Moss did. So the resiliency of him and USC in general, they were not physically quite up to it, but they gave it their best effort. So Michigan beat a really good football team and a talented football team, not quite up to where Lincoln Riley wants this eventually to land in terms of personnel top to bottom, but still a heck of a football team. So this is a possible landmark win for this program because of, as you mentioned last week, you said, hey, this is going to make or break the season. We're going to find out so much more about this team. And if they can rein in some semblance of a passing game based on your formula, which is very similar to what I thought too, you've got to just add to the passing game little by little each week, then this team could still win a Big Ten championship. Nobody wants to play this crew, that's for sure. They're going to be in for a rock'em sock'em, knuckle sandwich kind of game. And a lot of defensive backs and safeties don't want any part of that.
I'm with you, man. Tip of the cap to USC, the way they came back there in the second half and punched back. They would not have done that the last couple of years. And so clearly some culture has been addressed there for sure. And if I were a USC fan, I'd be disappointed with the result, but I would like what I saw from my team in that kind of an environment. And you look at the rest of their schedule, man, they still play Penn State and Notre Dame, but they get them both at home. I mean, tell me what game on their schedule the rest of the way they're a definitive underdog in. I don't see it. I don't think they'll go 11-1, but I don't think they're anything more than a field goal underdog in any other game the rest of the year, at least as long as they can keep Miller Moss healthy at quarterback. Let's nerd out on something before you and I go, okay? And you and I are of the same generation and grew up when CBS had the Big Ten football package in the early to mid 80s, right? And then ABC bought it away in the 1987 season. But you and I grew up listening to Brett Musburger saying, "You are looking live," with Ara Parsegan calling the games and Pat Hayden, and that music and that CBS Sports production value. I would tell anybody right now, if you've never watched the intro to the 1986 Michigan-Ohio State game in Columbus that CBS did for that game with the Rocky theme, it's one of the greatest I've ever seen. You have to go and find that on YouTube and watch it. It'll make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, okay? What they did with Michigan-USC in that intro in the Rose Bowl, I got to tell you, being at the Rose Bowl, and when you're at the Rose Bowl, it is like you're watching the game in HD in real life. It felt, with the sun out and those two uniforms out there on that immaculate field, CBS freaking brought it, dude. Brought it. And I could see some SEC people, some SEC blue check marks on X were like, we should never have let this go. ESPN's productions and games it ain't as cinematic as this. It's not. I thought that brought back a lot of, I was on the road Saturday because I didn't give us much of a chance. I'm like, might as well make some money. All right. And then I came home Sunday night and watched the presentation, and I was just like, dude, CBS freaking brought that, man. They went whole hog on that thing and just blew it up even bigger than it already was. So your thoughts on that and kind of a call back to our childhoods a little bit.
Well put. CBS and college football and the NFL is just a marriage that has always worked to give that almost the television version of NFL films, that type of regality to the event. Now, I did not see the Open because my Saturday afternoons are about conserving every second to watch as many plays in as many games as possible. So I did not see the Open.
It's online. Go look for it. It's in the CBS Sports Twitter feed. You need to go look for it. It's really good. Yeah.
I will give it a look. But you're right. I was anxious to see these two teams on the same field, the color clash, bringing to mind all sorts of Rose Bowl matchups from the early 80s on through the 2000s, of course. And, for them to be playing in the same stadium. USC is out of place geographically. That's not debatable. But there is a feel of a Big Ten team there. From a tradition and history standpoint. So the Big Ten did not just grab brands. There was some continuity that maybe they either lucked into because it just happened to be that way, or they actually gave thought to in bringing these brands into the league. But yes, USC and Michigan, in terms of a helmet game, sure, I've got my preference going another direction, but that's as good as it gets. And yes, CBS doing the game, Gary Danielson, maybe he's not quite at his peak, not quite at his prime, a little bit past, but hey, if it's Dick Enberg, if it's Kurt Gowdy, if it's fill in the blank, Brent, then yeah, I'll take them past their prime because it's still an excellent team between those two, the production. And yeah, ESPN, exceptional what they've done through the years. And of course, they give it the very best, and they produce more sports than anyone. But there's just something about, for guys our age, to see those traditional network labels, and especially CBS, on that game that gives it that extra credibility.
No doubt. And, the way the TV contract with the Big Ten works, every network gets a certain amount of preseason picks in order, and Fox gets the number one pick. And then after that, that's the TV guy. Then each week they have a draft, who gets what. This was CBS Sports' preseason pick, was this game. This after Fox took Michigan and Ohio State, this was CBS's pick, was this game. They wanted USC's first game in the Big Ten, and it just so happened to be against Michigan. And man, they absolutely brought it. They did a hell of a job with that production. Helps when you win it too in that setting, man. But it was the stuff of NFL films, as you said. All right, good stuff, Mark. Good to see you again, man, and we'll do it again next week. All right.
Appreciate it, Steve. Good to see you.
You bet. This week's X poll results, we asked you for your thoughts after Michigan's upset of USC to win its 23rd straight Big Ten game, 26th, by the way, if you count the Big Ten championship games. 81% of you said, whew. 20% of you said, we're back, baby. Which brings me to my feedback of the week. And this comes from Josh Lurie, who says, Steve, loved the show. Have been watching since the bad old days. Checking X after the game for your live tweets has become a post-game ritual. Love that you wear your maize and blue heart on your sleeve. And no matter what, we won the Natty. That's right, baby. No matter what, we won the Natty. And they can't take that away, ever. We won it all. So thank you, brother. Appreciate the kind words. And appreciate all of you as well. And if you want to show your appreciation for us, you can comment here in the comments on YouTube. You can leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Like, rate, share, subscribe, 5-star review. Please do all of those things for us, because when you do that, the algorithmic gods help us to find more Michigan fans just like you. And we need to do that. So thank you very much for doing that. And for all of you who already have, you can follow us on X. Not sure how much live game tweeting you'll get from me this week. I'm actually going up to Ann Arbor. Our annual family game trip is this week against Minnesota. And then we're going to go see those playoff bound Detroit Tigers in their final game the next day against the White Sox. So I'll get to some tweeting during the game. Remember, the internet signal at the big house is ass. So who knows? But you can usually follow us on game day, and you can always follow us in between episodes at Michigan Podcast on X or Twitter, at Michigan Podcast there. Until the next time, I'm Steve Deace. Remember, go Blue.